I'm going to be sort of talking around how you can compete with the Goliaths. So in this context, we're thinking within natural search. So that's going to be Amazon and eBay that are both just massive marketplace sort of Goliaths on Google. I know Becky from John Lewis is going to talk a bit about how Google themselves might be considered one of those Goliaths. But for my purposes, we're using Google as kind of the playing field, as it were. So to start things off, we need to try and get a bit of an understanding of the size of Amazon within natural search. So Ben's kind of summed it up from a general retail and sort of money, I guess, size of it. But yeah, from the size of Amazon on Google, essentially, and eBay. So kind of say, this is a chart from Systrix. And so if anyone's ever used Systrix or haven't used Systrix before, it's basically a natural search tool that calculates how visible a site is on the Google search results. And it just does it by using like a pool of millions and millions of keywords. And then it just kind of sums that up and decides to go, yep, so out of all of these keywords, Amazon is this visible. So Amazon, current point number for Amazon is around 2,500 visibility points, I think is just what they call it. And then the other massive marketplace, obviously, is eBay. And they're also a giant, but like, can anyone kind of figure out where they might be on that? It's kind of, yeah, so they're not even half. So they are by far the next biggest online sort of retail site in the UK by a long, long way, and they're under half of what Amazon are. And then the third biggest retailer, sort of normal online retailer by visibility, is quite a long way off of Amazon, and it's Argos. And I was expecting Dan to be in the room now, and he would be cheering and be very happy about that. But he's not, so, you know. So they are the third biggest online retailer by visibility, and they are at, what was it? It's 86% smaller than Amazon, which is a tremendous amount. So continuing on that theme, the fourth biggest sort of normal retailer is Next at 136 points. So we've gone from 2,500 to 136. And at this point, this is where my charts kind of go off the scale and you can't even see. So Next do go up and down like everyone else, but when they're on this chart, you can't even see it. They're just flat along the bottom. So this is the top 15 sort of retailers according to UK visibility. And you can see that there are a few. So John Lewis, Currys, Screwfix, Wayfair, Debenhams, they're all around that kind of 100-ish mark, which is obviously a really good place to be and what most sites would probably aim for. And then you've got these kind of secondary issues. So this is UK visibility. And as you can see, the third biggest UK visible site is actually Amazon.com. So it's a US site. So that's just compounding how big they are. And then also, down at 14, we've got eBay.com. So, and as well, so we've kind of ignored Etsy and Gumtree because they're kind of different type of seller. But Gumtree are actually also owned by eBay. So there's that. So Amazon can obviously be ridiculously visible because, like their logo shows, they sell everything from A to Z. So if there is a product search term, chances are they will have products or categories that do actually rank for it. Also, it should be said that there is another benefit that Amazon as itself, as a search term, is one of the biggest search terms, so that's definitely skewing their visibility a little bit, and it has to be said. They do rank rather well for their own terms. So Amazon can compete against everything, but what they can't necessarily do is specialize in everything. So this is where you can kind of try and win a slice of your own pie, come to terms with the fact that overall visibility is just one of many metrics to look at, and you need to start hunting down your own kind of visibility metric and score. So this is where it gets a bit boring and just showing you SERPs, which everyone loves to see. But to show you as an example, you've got these specialist kind of terms like 4K TV, 4K Ultra HD TV. So these would be the types of searches done by possibly a more discerning buyer, someone that knows a specific type of TV that they want to see, with more brand consideration and premium products in the results that they want to see. And in this very competitive area still, we can see a site like Richer Sounds, which is a relatively small site, does really, really well in these SERPs. And so it's a site dedicated to this kind of stuff, the higher end AV equipment market. And they have a lot of detail on the site for that more discerning buyer. So if we compare that to something like this, where we've got HD TV, a bit more generic, and cheap TVs, which has obviously got a money point associated to it, Google are getting really good at kind of understanding what the differences between all of these kind of search terms are and what's best to show users. So for these kind of terms, the users probably want a more kind of general retailer because they're looking for a deal, essentially. So they don't really care about Richer Sounds knowing their stuff about TVs. They just want to go and get whoever's the cheapest. So the customer doesn't really care about as much those detail specs, and Richer Sounds just don't actually show up for these kind of terms. But the more marketplace and the generalists and stuff like that, we've got Amazon, AO, Argos, Currys, they all show up for it instead. So Google are getting better at understanding who should show up for what type of searches and queries. And they're working hard on sort of that natural language programming stuff and AI to kind of understand in more ways than the classic sort of keywords equals relevance way that we all used to love, that was relatively easy to do. So this is where we can start getting those smaller sites to win out against the giants. So Amazon can't be that specialist in everything, and so these are the gaps that we need to try and push into to win. So it's all about understanding how they look and understand relevance for their search engine results. And to start with, as a basic, you need to match what you talk about with what the users you want also want. So this brings us to this phrase, which I'm sure anyone that is like SEO focused is probably sick of by now, but it's something that's been non-stop talked about and pushed really heavily by Google. Probably, I mean, they first mentioned it in 2014, and then it became a really big thing in kind of the Medic updates in 2018, and then every subsequent core algo update has just been, their advice has just been, you want to look at these kind of things, it's just generic. And so EAT stands for expertise, authority, and trust. And it's kind of understood on both domain and page levels. So while as a brand, you may have a strong authority as sort of a retailer, how does this kind of show on a page-by-page basis? How does this authority as a retailer relate to authority as a retailer for a specific product type? And then you've got trust from consumers. But again, how does this trust move on and become a trust in a particular area? So these three subjects work together to help Google understand relevancy. So going back to the posh 4K TV stuff as an example, Google will look at a myriad of things to try and score you on this basis. So are you an expert on the subject? And how have you actually proven this? So you've got one piece of content on high-end TVs with a link to a product page. That may not cut it against a site like Richer Sounds, which is kind of devoted to reviewing, understanding, being at the forefront of talking about and selling those kind of TVs and high-end stuff. So you might have authority within technology retailing, but how does that translate to, in particular, those 4K TVs that you're trying to sell or the high-end AV equipment? So sort of a few tips that we can kind of go through to try and show your relevance. First off, it's around making sure that first step to new content is correct before it even begins. This is where we quite often fail, and it's about writing things at the right time. It's about being relevant to what you're selling. Does it inform a user, and does it do something that isn't being done or answered by every other site out there? Is it truly valuable information? Isn't it something new? And then within that as well, you need to introduce content that the user actually wants within their buying cycle. So for example, if people are looking for, say, gaming type queries, do they want to see, I don't know, a video that's telling them what they need to do, or do they want to see a long form article, or do they just want to see a list of specs? You need to understand what your users want for that kind of product. And then you've got to create sort of content that is uniform across the site and works in tandem. So you've got a features page talking about new technology in TVs, and that's great, but then if that's your only page on it and you've never mentioned it again, that relevance isn't going to be passed through to the actual pages that you're trying to rank for those terms, and so it's kind of pointless. So that then takes us to the importance of linking. So you've obviously got your external links, but also internally linking stuff. So links send that relevant authority around the site and to the correct places. So linking to the TV's page with the relevant keywords where they are across pieces of the content, and you've got more than one, will really help Google and your users know where to go to find those TVs or those particular TVs. Another thing that we need to kind of mention is something that we've looked at quite a lot, and there is definitely a correlation between product volume and authority on a product type. So it will be really hard to show that you're super relevant for an area if you don't have a solid product range. So you've got two sites. One site sells 2 sofas, and one site sells a large range of many different types, variations, patterns, all that sort of stuff. The site that sells all of them is going to be easier to be seen as relevant for sofas than someone that's just got one. And then, just as a slightly different one, don't know if you guys can see that, but introducing real-time relevance. So this is something that you could do, this kind of your next steps that's quite fun, as it was. So you could do things like use artificial intelligence to understand weather data and get that in and put that direct on your site. So you've got your stores pages. So the London store, at the moment it's raining outside. Your London store should probably understand that and then suddenly have links for umbrellas and wellies and tell users, you know, it's raining outside, you might want to come in and get these things. It's all just going to really push Google to go, they know what they're talking about here. So that's kind of where I'm kind of going with this talk. So to kind of just sum it up, and hopefully what I've explained to you over this, these are the kind of 4 main bits of it. So you need to have clarity on your market and what's important to you. So this comes down to your keyword choice, everything like that. Your kind of some of the more old school SEO stuff. And you need to remember that even though sofas as a term would be great to rank for, you might not be able to play in that space, but you know that you can definitely get there because you're a specific retailer for a certain kind of fancy leather sofa. I don't really know my sofa, so I don't know where I was going with that. And then within that, it's about not getting obsessed with one data point. So we saw earlier just how massive overall visibility Amazon were, and you could look at that and go, oh, what's the point? They've got it sewn up. But in reality, there is a lot of space out there, and they've got a lot of things sewn up, but there are other gaps that you can easily go into. And that's where you've got to be aware of your brand strengths. So back to that clarity on your market and what's important, you need to know that you may not be the best person to try and go and put a load of effort into trying to rank for sofas if that's just really not your deal. You might sell them, but that may not be your big thing. So understand your brand strengths. And then finally, it's all about showing users, and therefore Google, why you are an expert on the products that you sell. They need to clearly understand that. So yeah, so that's what I wanted to talk about. Obviously, at the end of this, we're going to have loads of questions. So yeah, think something up and throw it at me. And I'm going to pass over to Callum now. Thank you.